Sometimes the most unexpected betrayals are the ones that shatter our entire reality. Picture a loving mother, a devoted wife stepping into the grand lobby of the Hyatt Regency in downtown Chicago, her pulse quickening at the thought of surprising her husband on his routine business trip. Yet instead of his welcoming embrace, she is greeted by a sight that rips her world apart. A tender kiss shared between him and a mysterious woman in a sleek black coat. In that single heart-stopping moment, everything changes. Secrets spill into the open heart's break, and as a new chapter begins, it unfolds into a storm of regret, revenge, and the ultimate fight for hope. Emma Davenport woke to the sound of her alarm clock vibrating stubbornly on the bedside table, its gentle buzzing a relentless reminder of the hectic day ahead. She blinked herself awake momentarily, disoriented by the early dawn light cutting through the thin curtains. For a moment, she simply lay there, taking in the comforting smell of fresh linen and the faint lemony tang of the cleaning spray she always used. Next to her, the bed was cold and empty. Mark had left for Chicago the previous afternoon, attending yet another financial conference as part of his ever-demanding job at Harper & Green Investments. Their 3-year-old daughter Lily stirred in the next room. Emma could hear the soft hum of a lullaby, playing from the child's nightlight, a small giraffe that projected stars onto the ceiling. She swung her legs off the bed and headed to Lily's room, her mind already flipping through the day's tasks. She planned to surprise Mark in Chicago that evening. Over the last few months, an uneasy feeling had gnawed at her, a suspicion she kept pushing aside. While Mark claimed to be overwhelmed with work, she wanted to see for herself if everything was really as he said. She scooped Lily into her arms, inhaling the sweet baby shampoo in her daughter's hair. A wave of resolve swept over her. For years, she had trusted Mark blindly. He was the calm, steady presence in her life, a man who made time for bedtime stories and neighborhood barbecues even as he rose through the ranks of his firm. Yet something had changed. It was in the way he avoided her eyes at the dinner table, in the vague excuses he made after late-night phone calls. Emma needed clarity, and she was determined to get it. Despite her growing worries, Emma couldn't forget the man who once charmed her with fresh daisies on their first date. In the early days, Mark was her everything. They had met by chance at an art gallery in downtown Seattle, introduced by mutual acquaintances. Emma had been immediately drawn to his warm laugh and quiet confidence. They shared a passion for exploring museums, volunteering at local charities, and dreaming of a future filled with travel love and children. But as Mark climbed higher in his career, work trips became the norm. It started slowly, a day trip to Los Angeles, a 2-night conference in Boston. Emma had brushed off any concerns back then, reminding herself that she had married a man with ambition. His success was their success. But with each promotion, Mark's job demands soared. His phone was forever buzzing with new messages. His eyes flickered with tension whenever she asked questions. A month ago, Emma found a receipt in Mark's coat pocket from the St. Regis Hotel in Chicago. It was for a lavish dinner for 2. Mark had told her it was merely a networking meal with a prospective client named Mr. Townsend. Yet the scrawled signature on the receipt wasn't Mark's handwriting. Alarm bells rang in Emma's mind, but she was too afraid to push him, afraid of what she might learn. In the back of her mind, she clung to a fragile hope that there was an innocent explanation. That morning, as she kissed Lily goodbye and entrusted her to the care of her mother, Linda Pierce, Emma's nerves twisted in her stomach. She told herself she was just going to surprise Mark, to remind him that his family was right here, waiting and loving him. She prayed that her doubts were unfounded, and that by nightfall they would be laughing about her silly suspicions. She had no idea that what she would witness in a few short hours would change everything. The drive from their suburban home in Lake Forest to Chicago was typically just over an hour, but traffic stretched it to nearly 2. Emma found herself tapping her fingers anxiously on the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the clock every few minutes. She had planned her arrival to coincide with Mark's break between conference sessions. The plan was simple: appear in the hotel lobby around 7 in the evening. Text him to meet her by the grand staircase and greet him with a heartfelt kiss. She hoped the spontaneity would reignite the spark that had dwindled over the past year. As she navigated the bustling city streets, Emma remembered how much she used to love Chicago. She had attended college here years ago and always found an unmatched energy in its towering skyline. Now the once exciting metropolis felt daunting, its tall buildings pressing in on her. She turned onto Michigan Avenue, weaving through throngs of pedestrians. With every mile, her heart pounded faster. She parked in an underground garage and made her way to the Hyatt Regency, an enormous structure that soared above the city. Emma swiped a bit of lipstick across her lips, checked her reflection in the mirrored panels near the revolving doors, and took a calming breath. She tried not to let her anxious thoughts overshadow her intentions. If she was going to face Mark, it had to be with confidence. Clutching her purse, she stepped into the grand lobby, with its marble floors and lofty ceilings. She could almost imagine Mark's surprised grin, the way he'd lift her up in a twirl. But as she scanned the opulent space, she didn't see him at the lounge or by the registration desk. Instead, she saw something else, something that made her freeze in her tracks. There near the bar area, under soft golden lights, sat Mark. He wasn't alone. A woman with dark, cascading hair leaned close, her hand resting intimately on his arm. Emma's brain struggled to process what she was seeing. For a second, she prayed it was some misunderstanding. Perhaps this was a colleague, and they were discussing business details. But then Mark turned to the woman, and their lips met in a slow, unmistakably romantic kiss. Emma felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Numbness washed over her entire body. Her feet rooted to the spot, and it was as if the rest of the world faded away, leaving only the horrifying sight of her husband kissing a stranger. It was surreal, like a bad dream from which she couldn't wake. She stood there not more than 20 feet away, unnoticed by Mark. The woman, elegantly dressed in a fitted black coat, pulled back and gazed adoringly at him. Emma recognized that look. It was the look of someone deeply involved. She realized with acute clarity that this wasn't just a casual fling. This was something that had been going on long enough for them to appear entirely at ease in public. Tears pricked the back of her eyes, but fury overcame her shock. How dare he do this here so blatantly? She wanted to stride across the lobby, slap him, make a scene. 1,000 impulses warred in her mind: heartbreak, anger, confusion, and the fragile remains of her dignity. Ultimately, she took a shaking breath and backed away, retreating into the shadows of the expansive corridor, leaving Mark and his mistress, who for now remained oblivious to Emma's presence. Emma didn't remember how she got from the hotel to the street. One moment, she was inside that marble lobby, watching Mark betray her. The next, she was stumbling onto the sidewalk, swallowing lungfuls of the frigid Chicago air. Her phone buzzed in her purse, but she couldn't bring herself to look at it. If it was Mark, she didn't want to talk to him. If it was anyone else, she couldn't summon the strength to explain what she'd just witnessed. For what felt like hours, she wandered aimlessly along the streets, tears streaming down her cheeks. She replayed the scene in her head over and over, each iteration stabbing deeper than the last. Glimpses of their life together flashed before her eyes. Mark's smile on their wedding day, the time he wept with joy when Lily was born, the nights he would scoop her into his arms and promise her the world. How could that same man now be kissing another woman without remorse? Eventually, she found herself standing near a small park, the lights from a nearby cafe illuminating the tears on her face. She sank onto a bench and let her emotions course through her. Anger flared white-hot, mingling with heartbreak. She wanted answers, yet the thought of confronting Mark right now was too much to bear. Her phone buzzed again. Summoning her nerve, she pulled it out to see a text from her mother Linda, who asked, "How's the surprise going? Is Mark excited?" Lily's asking for her daddy. Emma's gut twisted as she read the words. How could she ever explain this to Lily? She typed a quick, shaky reply. "Not great. I'll be home soon." Then she hailed a taxi back to her car, her mind already plotting her next move. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She paced the living room, waiting for Mark to return from Chicago. She had no intention of revealing she had gone there to see him. Let him try to lie his way out. First, she wanted to see how deep his betrayal would go. Around midnight, Mark finally strode into the house with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and the faint smell of hotel soap clinging to his skin. "Hey, honey," he greeted, sounding casual, almost loving, as though nothing was amiss. "Conference ran late. You didn't have to wait up." Emma forced a tight smile. "I wanted to see you," she replied coolly. In truth, she was marveling at his ability to pretend. Her heart hammered against her ribcage, and she felt the urge to scream at him to demand he tell her the truth. But she waited, letting the tension build between them. Mark went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and offered Emma one as well. As he turned around, she fixed him with a steady gaze. "Did you have dinner with Mr. Townsend again?" she asked, voice trembling lightly. He hesitated, eyes flicking away for the briefest moment before returning to hers. "Yeah," he lied smoothly. It was all business, just like before. Emma's anger flared at the blatant untruth. She clenched her fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She could feel her composure crumbling. Suddenly she snapped. "Stop lying to me, Mark. I saw you." His glass of water slipped from his fingers, shattering on the tile floor. For a moment, neither of them moved. The confession hung in the air, heavier than the tension that preceded it. "Saw me," he whispered, face draining of color. Emma gulped a shaky breath, eyes brimming with tears. "I was at the Hyatt tonight. I saw you with her." She spat the final word with venom, each syllable echoing with betrayal. Mark's mind whirred as he scrambled to regain control of the situation. Emma watched his expressions shift from shock to denial, then to something like desperation. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally managed. "It's not what you think." Emma laughed a harsh, broken sound. "Oh, really? Because it looked like you and that woman were pretty cozy," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Is she your mistress?" Mark raked a hand through his hair. She's Veronica Graham," he admitted, voice low. "She's a colleague from the firm. We've been seeing each other." Emma's stomach lurched, and she turned away, unable to look at him. Of all the words she expected to hear, his direct admission of guilt was both validating and soul-crushing. Why, she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and hurt. Why would you do this to us?" He took a faltering step forward, only to stop when he saw her recoil. "It just happened." Mark tried, his voice shaking. "I've been under a lot of stress. Veronica understands my work. She's there late at night, pulling the same hours, dealing with the same pressures." "Don't!" Emma hissed, tears streaking her face. "Don't you dare reduce this to stress and late nights. We have a child, Mark. We had a life." He wiped a hand across his face. "I never stopped loving you," he insisted. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." "That's a convenient word," she spat, "and one that doesn't mean much now. You think you can just come back, say it was a mistake, and everything is fine." She turned away again, her voice dropping to a pained whisper. "I trusted you." Mark tried to speak, but she cut him off with a trembling hand. "It's too late for apologies. You made your choice." With that, she fled to their bedroom, leaving him alone in the kitchen, shards of broken glass and cold water pooling around his feet, a fitting metaphor for the ruin of their marriage. Emma had always believed she could handle anything if she and Mark faced it together. But that night, as she curled into a tight ball on their bed, she realized she was on her own. The magnitude of his betrayal crushed her. The man she thought she knew inside and out had been leading a double life. How could she ever trust him again? Throughout the night, Emma wrestled with her thoughts. She heard Mark downstairs making phone calls, likely to Veronica. She wondered if he was telling her that Emma knew. The idea of them discussing her pain so casually left her furious and humiliated. She knew she couldn't stay in that house, playing the role of dutiful wife while Mark sorted out his affair. When Lily's soft cries broke the silence at dawn, Emma rose mechanically. She realized with sudden clarity what she had to do. She needed to leave. Emma's first priority was her daughter, protecting her from the fallout of this nightmare. As Lily's innocent eyes opened, Emma forced a reassuring smile onto her face, but inside her heart was in shreds. Once Lily was fed and dressed, Emma scribbled a short note for Mark. "I'm taking Lily away for a while. Don't follow us. We need space." She set the note on the kitchen counter, next to the shards of broken glass that still lay there from the night before Mark hadn't even bothered to clean them up. It was symbolic, she realized, of how little he cared for order, now that his secret was out. Emma packed a suitcase, taking only essentials. She called her mother, but Linda didn't pick up. She didn't leave a voicemail. She wanted to make her move before Mark woke up. Give herself a head start. Within half an hour, Emma had Lily strapped into the back seat of the car and was pulling away from the life she had known. She drove eastward, not entirely sure where she was going. Emma had distant relatives in Michigan, an aunt named Eleanor, who'd moved to a lakeside property near Traverse City. It was a place Emma had visited a few times in childhood. Aunt Eleanor and Emma's mother had never been close, but Emma remembered her aunt as a kind, if somewhat reserved woman. With no other plan in mind, Emma dialed the number she found in an old address book tucked away in the glove compartment. To her relief, Eleanor picked up on the second ring, after a hasty explanation that left out most details. Emma asked if she and Lily could stay for a while. "We just need to get away," she confessed in a trembling voice. Despite years of little contact, Eleanor hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. The promise of a temporary haven calmed Emma's racing heart. She pressed down on the accelerator, determined to put as much distance as possible between them and Mark. Lily dozed in the back seat, hugging her little stuffed elephant. Every now and then Emma glanced in the rear-view mirror, tears stinging her eyes. She felt guilty uprooting Lily's life, but she believed she was protecting her daughter from the emotional storm. For now, at least they would be safe in a remote lakeside cottage, away from the chaos Mark's actions had unleashed. As the cityscape gave way to open highway, and then rolling farmland, Emma's thoughts drifted to what would happen next. She had no clear plan. The heartbreak was too fresh to think about lawyers or custody battles. But one thing was sure: she would not let Mark's betrayal define her or harm Lily. If he wanted to keep playing the role of an unfaithful husband, he would do it alone. Mark awoke in an empty house. The silence, usually comforting after a long trip, felt suffocating. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at his phone. No new messages from Emma. Confusion prickled at his mind. Normally Lily would be chattering in the living room, or Emma would have breakfast ready. He rolled out of bed, the events of the previous night seeping back into his consciousness like a poison. He found Emma's note on the kitchen counter. His stomach lurched as he read it. "I'm taking Lily away for a while. Don't follow us. We need space." Shock turned to panic. She was gone, and she had taken Lily. Mark ran a hand through his hair, guilt and fear swirling together. He reached for his phone, dialing Emma's number, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried Linda's number, hoping her mother would have some information, but Linda sounded just as alarmed when Mark mentioned Emma's disappearance. "What do you mean she's gone?" Linda demanded. "She left Lily with me yesterday morning. Now you're saying she took Lily away." When Mark's stunned silence answered her question well enough, and Linda hung up in anger, promising to find her daughter, Mark paced the house like a trapped animal, scanning for any sign of where Emma might have gone. He scoured her desk drawers, the bedroom closet, even the attic. There was no clue. All he found were the heart-breakingly empty spaces where Emma's clothes had been. The realization that she had planned this departure, packed Lily's things, wrote the note, and left without looking back, crushed him. He knew he had done this. He was the one who'd introduced deceit into their marriage. And now, facing the consequences, the depth of his regret began to sink in. But regret wouldn't bring Emma back. If he wanted to salvage anything, he would have to take drastic steps to win back his family's trust, assuming Emma would even give him the chance. Days stretched into a week, and still Emma did not return. Mark reached out to everyone he could think of: mutual friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives, but no one knew where Emma and Lily might be. In a moment of desperation, Mark confided in his best friend and co-worker, James Overton. James's advice was blunt. "You need a lawyer." Reluctantly, Mark scheduled an appointment with Rebecca Slater, a top family law attorney in Chicago. Sitting in her sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Mark felt exposed and vulnerable. Rebecca studied him from behind her large mahogany desk, her expression unreadable. "So your wife left," she stated, scanning over the initial paperwork he had filled out, "and she took your child with her. Have you received any official communication regarding a divorce or custody arrangement?" Mark shook his head. "No. She left a note. That's it." "I've tried calling, texting, no response." Rebecca folded her hands. "Did you give her cause?" Mark's face burned. He cleared his throat. I had an affair." She found out. Rebecca nodded her gaze, never wavering. Infidelity can certainly precipitate drastic actions. "Look, we can file a petition for a formal custody arrangement, but if she hasn't filed for divorce yet, it's a bit tricky. Are you sure you want to go down that path immediately? Sometimes it escalates things beyond repair." Mark hesitated, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. All he truly wanted was to fix things with Emma, to apologize, to beg her forgiveness. But Emma was gone, and he had no idea how to reach her. "I just want to see my daughter," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." Rebecca's face softened slightly. "Let's hold off on immediate legal action. I'll do some private searching, see if we can find out where she might be staying. Once we know that, you can decide how to proceed. In the meantime, gather financial statements, property details, everything." Mark left her office feeling more lost than ever. He had set a ruinous ball in motion by kissing Veronica that night in the hotel lobby, by allowing their affair to blossom in the first place. Now, with Emma and Lily vanished, he realized the gaping void where his family used to be. For the first time, the possibility of never seeing them again crushed him beyond measure. Emma found a quiet solace in Aunt Eleanor's lakeside home. The weather was beginning to warm, melting the last patches of snow around the cabin's perimeter. Lily, oblivious to the drama unfolding, loved splashing at the shoreline with her tiny boots. She giggled when the cold water touched her toes and made a game of collecting shiny pebbles. Aunt Eleanor was an enigma. She did not pry for details about Emma's sudden arrival. Instead, she offered the comforts of home warm meals, a cozy bedroom, and an ample supply of patient understanding. Emma was grateful for the sanctuary. When she couldn't sleep at night, she'd wander down to the dock, staring out at the moonlit lake. The stillness of the water mirrored her new sense of limbo, not quite sure where she was headed, but certain she couldn't go back to the life she left. One evening, Aunt Eleanor joined Emma on the dock, handing her a steaming mug of tea. They stood in silence for a while, the night breeze rippling across the lake's surface. Finally, Eleanor spoke in her measured, quiet voice. "I don't need to know everything that happened, dear, but I can see the pain in your eyes." Emma nodded, tears brimming. "He cheated," she said. Simply. "I saw him, there's no doubt." Aunt Eleanor inhaled slowly. "I'm so sorry," she replied, setting a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "I'd never presume to tell you what to do, but know that if you need time, or if you need someone to lean on, I'm here." Emma exhaled shakily. "I just can't believe he'd throw away our family like that. Now I'm afraid of the future. Afraid he'll try to take Lily, or that I'll never be able to stand on my own 2 feet again." Eleanor's gaze was firm, yet kind. "Emma, you're stronger than you think. Start with today. Focus on what you need right now to keep yourself and Lily safe and stable." Over the following weeks, Emma took on small tasks to help Eleanor around the property. She found a moment of peace in the rhythm of raking leaves and planting new flowers. Lily thrived on the freedom chasing after butterflies and squealing with delight whenever a duck paddled near the shore. The constant ache of betrayal was still there, but day by day, Emma felt a small kernel of strength grow within her. While Emma and Lily found an uneasy peace in Michigan, Mark's mistress Veronica, Graham, was facing her own challenges. In the aftermath of Emma's disappearance, Mark had distanced himself from Veronica, plagued by guilt and worry. Their once passionate affair, fueled by late-night strategy sessions and stolen kisses in the office corridor, had begun to sour under the weight of real-life consequences. Veronica was no stranger to ambition. She thrived in the fast-paced environment of Harper & Green Investments. But rumors circulated quickly in corporate hallways. Whispers of the married Mark Davenport's affair reached many ears, and it didn't take long for people to link it to Veronica. The sly looks and hushed judgments weighed on her every time she walked into the office. She confronted Mark about his sudden coldness one evening when he agreed to meet her at a discreet cafe near their workplace. "I feel like you're punishing me for something." "We both chose," Veronica said. frustration evident in her voice. Mark rubbed his forehead. He looked tired, older somehow. "I'm not punishing you," he insisted. I'm worried about Emma and Lily. She's gone, Veronica. I have no clue where she is. And it's my fault." Veronica reached out to take his hand, but Mark pulled away. The rejection stung. "You can't blame yourself entirely," she tried. "We both knew what we were doing. Emma finding out, well, that was never going to be clean or easy." Mark stared into his coffee cup. "That doesn't help," he said, voice hollow. "I need to make this right, but I don't even know how. Everything is a mess." Realizing the rift that had formed, Veronica felt resentment rise within her. She had risked her reputation and emotional well-being for a man who now seemed bent on retreating into his guilt. Still, she clung to the hope that she and Mark could weather the storm. After all, their bond went beyond mere lust, or so she believed. Frustrated by Rebecca Slater's slow progress and desperate for answers, Mark hired a private investigator named Jason Rudd. Jason came highly recommended by James Overton, who had once used him for a sensitive corporate matter. Though Mark felt uneasy about spying on his own wife, he rationalized that he had no other choice if he wanted to see Lily again. Jason was a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and penetrating eyes. He listened intently as Mark recounted the night Emma left the note and the total lack of communication since. "She's not using her credit cards or her phone. At least I can't trace anything," Mark explained anxiously. Jason nodded. "She's being cautious. Likely she's using cash or a secondary bank account you're not aware of." He tapped a pen against his notepad. "Any family she might rely on. Friends outside your circle." Mark thought about Emma's mother, but Linda didn't seem to know anything. Then he remembered Emma's father had passed away years ago. She has an aunt, I think, on her mother's side. Eleanor something. They weren't very close. Jason jotted down the name. Eleanor. "That's a start." He handed Mark a stack of forms. "Sign these. I'll check phone records, any property ownership under that name. It might take a while, but we'll find them." As Mark complied, his heart pounded with conflicting emotions. Hiring a PI felt like a violation of Emma's privacy, but the alternative, doing nothing, left him paralyzed. The memory of her tear-streaked face the night she confronted him sliced through his guilt. He told himself he was doing this for Lily's sake, to be a father again, to fix what he'd broken. A small part of him feared what he'd say if he actually found Emma. Could they repair the marriage? Would she ever forgive him? Each question led to more uncertainty. Yet, Mark pushed forward, fueled by desperation. Weeks passed in Michigan. Emma's life fell into a quiet, routine breakfast with Aunt Eleanor, and Lily walks by the lake, occasional trips to the small town for groceries. She had saved enough money to sustain them for a while, and Aunt Eleanor refused any rent payments, insisting Emma's presence was enough. Still, Emma knew she couldn't hide forever. She spent her nights reading about divorce laws, spousal support, and child custody. The words swam before her tired eyes, overwhelming her with legal jargon. She jotted questions in a notebook, hoping to someday get real legal advice. One afternoon, Emma received a phone call on the new prepaid cell phone she had purchased under a false name. To her surprise, it was Linda Pierce, her mother. Emma froze, torn between her desire to talk to the woman who raised her and her fear that Mark might be tracking their communication. "Mum," Emma whispered, stepping out onto the cabin's porch. "Oh, thank God," Linda exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. "Emma, are you all right? Mark told me you left, but he doesn't know where you are." Emma hesitated, tears springing to her eyes. She missed her mother desperately, but she also feared that Linda might share her location with Mark. "We're safe," she managed. "I can't tell you where, though." "Not yet." Linda sniffled. "I won't force you, but please know I'm worried." "Lily is okay." "She's fine, Mum. She's healthy and happy." Emma looked toward the lake where Lily was chasing after a butterfly. He betrayed me, Mum. I can't go back. Not now." "I understand," Linda replied. "I don't know what to think of Mark anymore. He seems genuinely torn up. But this is your decision, dear. Just promise me you'll stay in touch. I won't tell him anything you don't want me to." Emma allowed herself a tiny measure of comfort. "Thank you, Mum. I'll call again soon." As the call ended, Emma felt a strange combination of relief and guilt. She had reconnected with her mother, but she still felt guilty for cutting off Mark entirely. Yet every time she pictured him with that other woman, the heartbreak flared anew. She reminded herself she was protecting Lily, and she had no obligation to rush back into Mark's arms. Back in Chicago, Jason Rudd's investigation bore fruit. He discovered that a certain Eleanor Pierce owned a modest lakeside property near Traverse City, Michigan. Public records indicated a recent utility spike suggesting new occupants. Jason presented his findings to Mark in a manila envelope one morning at a discreet coffee shop. "This is likely where your wife is staying," Jason said matter-of-factly. "Based on what I've gathered, she's been there for at least a few weeks." Mark's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. A property deed with Eleanor Pierce's name, some bank transactions for groceries, a few photographs of Emma's car, parked discreetly off the main road. Guilt and hope twisted together in his chest. She was within driving distance, alive and well with Lily. "What do I do now?" Mark asked quietly. Jason shrugged. "That's your call. Legally, you can attempt to force her to return, or at least negotiate custody. But if you truly want to reconcile, showing up with a court order might not be the best approach." Mark swallowed hard, thinking of Emma's tearful face. "I just want to see my daughter," he repeated. "I want Emma to know how sorry I am." Jason gave him a curt nod. "Then go. But I'd advise you do it gently." Fueled by this revelation, Mark set out that same afternoon. The drive seemed endless, his thoughts a maelstrom. Would Emma slam the door in his face? Would she let Lily see him? Did he even deserve forgiveness? Each mile brought him closer to answers he might not be ready to hear. Late evening shadows stretched across the gravel road as Mark pulled up to the address Jason had provided. The cottage stood near the water's edge, lights glowing softly inside. Mark parked a short distance away, heart pounding in his ears. He approached the front porch, his mouth dry as sand. His footsteps sounded unnaturally loud on the wooden steps. Before he could knock, the door swung open, revealing Aunt Eleanor. She regarded him calmly, her lips a thin line of disapproval. "Mark," she said, voice cool. "I knew you'd come eventually." He nodded, swallowing hard. "May I see Emma?" Eleanor stepped aside, but didn't invite him in. "I'll get her. Wait here." Moments later, Emma appeared in the doorway. Her face paled at the sight of him, and she instinctively turned to check on Lily, who was napping in another room. Closing the door behind her, she joined him on the porch, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. "How did you find us?" she demanded, voice trembling with anger. Mark clenched and unclenched his fists. "I had to. I hired a PI." "Emma, I'm sorry." "Sorry," she repeated bitterly. "You come here with a private investigator's evidence spying on me and say you're sorry." He blinked back tears. I couldn't just do nothing. Emma, please. I had to see Lily. I'm not here to take her away. I want to see my daughter. And I want to talk. Can we please talk? Emma stared at him, her emotions warring across her face. She glanced back at the cottage where Aunt Eleanor hovered in the doorway. Finally, she exhaled. Fine. But Lily is asleep, and I don't want you waking her. We'll talk on the dock. Mark nodded, following her across the small yard to the lakeside dock. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting an ethereal glow over the surface. They stopped at the edge, the gentle sound of lapping waves filling the tension between them. They stood in silence for a moment, before Mark spoke, his voice cracking. I've been going crazy not knowing where you were, if you were safe. Emma's jaw tightened. I'm safe enough, she replied, her gaze fixed on the dark water. And Lily is fine too. No thanks to you. Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. I deserve that. Emma, I don't know if it helps, but I ended things with Veronica. I told her it's over. I'm willing to quit my job if that's what it takes to show you I'm serious about our marriage. Emma turned to look at him, tears glistening in her eyes. Our marriage? She echoed. You broke our marriage the moment you slept with her. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was for me to see you two together in that lobby? His own eyes grew misty. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I was an idiot. I got caught up in the pressures of work, the excitement there's no excuse. I just want a chance to make it right. Emma laughed bitterly, tears spilling over. Make it right. How, Mark? You expect me to pretend this never happened, to forget the image of you kissing her? Her voice shook with anger. You lied to me. You lied about business trips, about dinners with Mr. Townsend. You chose her over us. I never chose her over you. Mark insisted, his words tumbling out. I was confused. Emma raised a trembling hand, stopping him. That's the thing, Mark. You did choose her every time you went to her hotel room or stayed late at the office for those so-called meetings. Now it's too late to say it was a mistake. The damage is done. Mark's breath hitched. Do you hate? Emma's tears fell in earnest. I hate what you've done. I hate that I have to look at Lily and know you betrayed us. She shook her head. But I'm also hurt, and part of me still loves you. I hate that the most. A choking sob escaped Mark's lips. He reached out to her, but she stepped back. They stood there raw and wounded under the moonlight, an unbridgeable chasm between them. Their conversation stretched into the late hours. Emma refused to let Mark inside the cottage, but she eventually relented to his request to see Lily in the morning. They sat under the starlight, discussing logistics, how Mark might visit without driving Emma away for good, how to handle finances in the interim. When Emma finally slipped back into the cottage, Mark slept fitfully in his car. His mind reeled from the confrontation, from Emma's tearful rage, from the faint glimmer of hope that she had not declared outright that their marriage was over. At dawn, Lily's voice roused Emma from sleep. The child was excited to see the ducks on the lake, babbling in her toddler speak. Emma's heart clenched, knowing Mark was waiting just outside. She made a quick decision and led Lily to the porch. There Mark stood with dark circles under his eyes and a weary smile. "Hi, sweetheart," he said softly, crouching down to Lily's eye level. The child looked unsure, hugging Emma's leg. For a moment, heartbreak flickered across Mark's face. He reached out gently, and Lily hesitated before stepping forward. "Daddy missed you," he whispered, pulling her into a delicate hug. Emma watched, tears brimming again. She reminded herself that Lily deserved a father, even if he was flawed. That tiny moment of reunion was enough to tear at Emma's carefully constructed wall. Part of her wanted to lash out and push him away. Another part wanted to bury her face in his chest to recall the warmth of the man she had loved. They spent a tense half-hour together, Mark helping Lily feed the ducks. Emma standing off to the side, arms folded protectively. When Lily asked if Daddy was coming home, Emma felt the sting of tears once again. She shook her head silently, unable to speak. Mark glanced at her, his eyes filled with regret. "Let's take this one step at a time," he murmured, more to Emma than to Lily. She gave him a curt nod, swallowing the pain, and hoping, for Lily's sake, that they could find a way to coexist, whatever that might look like. Over the following days, Mark rented a small cabin in the same area, a few miles down the lake. Emma allowed him carefully supervised visits with Lily, ensuring the child didn't suffer the sting of confusion or broken promises. It was an uneasy truce. Emma refused to discuss a permanent reconciliation. Her wounds were still too fresh. But she also didn't push for an immediate divorce, torn between her lingering love for Mark and her deep-seated anger. Aunt Eleanor silently observed the delicate dance between them, offering Emma private words of support, but never overstepping. She saw the torment in Emma's eyes and recognized the complexity of heartbreak, betrayal, and love colliding. Occasionally, Emma and Mark found themselves talking about mundane things, Lily's bedtime routines, her favorite songs, or what she ate for lunch. These trivial exchanges felt odd, yet somehow comforting. They were a reminder of the normalcy they once shared. Meanwhile, Mark's guilt weighed heavily. He kept his distance, respecting Emma's boundary. Each time he saw Lily's face light up at his arrival, he felt a dual pang of joy and despair. Would he ever be fully forgiven? Or was he doomed to this half-life, desperately clinging to fatherhood, while Emma rebuilt her own world without him? A month into this arrangement, Veronica made an unannounced appearance. She had tracked Mark's sudden absence from work, discovered his leads about Emma's location, and decided to confront him. Her arrival sent shockwaves through the fragile peace Emma and Mark had established. Veronica showed up at Mark's rented cabin, her eyes blazing with anger and betrayal. "You haven't returned my calls or texts," she spat. "I had to find you on my own. So this is where you ran off to playing house with your wife again?" Mark stiffened. "It's not like that," he tried to explain. "Veronica, I told you it's over. Emma and Lily are my family. I'm trying to fix things." Veronica let out a scornful laugh. "Fix things? You think you can just walk away from me, from everything we shared?" She gestured around. "Did you expect me to just vanish so you could rebuild your perfect suburban life?" Mark felt a surge of irritation mixed with shame. "We made a mistake," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm owning up to it now. There's nothing more to say." Unfortunately, Emma had arrived at that exact moment, intending to drop Lily off for a short visit. She froze at the sight of Veronica, her heart pounding with renewed fury. The scene was all too much, a vicious reminder of the betrayal that had driven her here in the first place. Veronica turned at the sound of Emma's footsteps, her stare turning icy. "So this is the woman you ran away to," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. "Isn't it ironic? Emma, you ran, he chased you, and now the mistress is left behind." Before Emma could respond, Mark stepped forward. "Veronica, that's enough. This is between me and Emma." But Emma couldn't hold back her outrage. She marched up to Veronica, voice trembling. "Don't you dare twist this. You tore our marriage apart, and now you have the nerve to come here." Veronica's eyes flashed. "Your marriage was already in trouble, sweetheart. That's why Mark was with me in the first place." Emma's hand flew before she could stop herself, slapping Veronica hard across the face. Veronica staggered back, eyes wide with shock. Lily, who was strapped into a car seat behind Emma, began to cry at the commotion. Mark rushed to intervene. Tears burned in Emma's eyes. She realized how easily the veneer of civility had shattered. With a shaking breath, she turned to Mark. "This is exactly why I left," she said through gritted teeth. "There's no peace with you. It's all lies and chaos." And in that moment, Emma vowed she would finalize her decision. It was time to end this toxic circle and protect herself and her child once and for all. That evening, Emma called a divorce attorney in Traverse City named Michael Sanders, recommended by a local acquaintance. She explained her situation, the betrayal, her temporary residence, and her desire to protect Lily. Michael listened patiently, then laid out her options. "Given your circumstances, we can file here in Michigan, provided you establish residency," he explained. "But typically, jurisdiction could be contested by your husband if he files in Illinois. We'll need to act carefully to ensure your rights and Lily's interests are protected." Emma nodded, her hands trembling around the phone. She felt a strange clarity settle over her, like a burden lifting off her shoulders. She would no longer hide. She would fight for her daughter's stability and for her own future. The next day, she met Michael in person. His office was modest but tidy, and Emma found his demeanor reassuring. She handed him a stack of notes and documents she had painstakingly compiled, evidence of Mark's infidelity financial records, Lily's birth certificate. "I have to do this," she said, voice wavering. "I can't live in this in-between anymore." Michael patted her hand. "You're making a brave choice. We'll file the necessary paperwork. Be prepared your husband may contest it, and the process might get messy. But I'll guide you every step of the way." Emma exhaled. "Thank you," she whispered, tears hovering in her eyes. I want peace. For Lily and for myself." When Mark received the divorce papers by courier at his rented cabin, a wave of nausea nearly knocked him off balance. Even though he suspected this outcome, seeing it in black and white was a shock. The words hammered home the finality of what was happening. He hurried to Emma's cottage, ignoring the voice in his head that told him she might slam the door in his face. Aunt Eleanor answered her disapproval as evident as ever, but she allowed him to step inside when he begged for a moment of Emma's time. In the living room, Emma stood with her hands folded, her expression resigned. "You got the papers," she said calmly. Mark lifted the manila envelope. "Is this really what you want?" Emma swallowed, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed. "I don't see it any other way. You cheated on me, Mark, and then you brought all that chaos here. I can't expose Lily to that kind of turmoil. She deserves better." He sank onto the sofa, shaking his head. "I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me easily. But can't we try counseling or a trial separation? Do we have to go straight to divorce?" Emma softened for a second, her gaze drifting to the hallway where Lily was playing. "I wish I could say yes," she murmured. "But we tried coexisting. Look what happened. Veronica showed up and it all fell apart again. I can't keep living like this, Mark. My heart is broken. I need to move on." Mark felt tears sting his eyes. "What about custody?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't want to lose Lily." Emma's jaw tightened. We'll figure out an arrangement. She needs her father, but not if it means I'm constantly in agony." Mark nodded, tears slipping down his face. "I understand." He stood clutching the divorce papers as though they weighed 1,000 pounds. Before leaving, he managed a broken whisper. "I'm sorry, Emma. I love you. I always will." She didn't respond as he walked out the door. Only after he left did Emma allow herself the luxury of sinking to the floor, sobbing quietly, while Aunt Eleanor gently stroked her hair. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal filings, mediation sessions, and tense negotiations. Emma insisted on primary custody of Lily, with Mark allowed scheduled visitation. Despite his initial resistance, Mark eventually agreed. He realized that forcing a bitter custody battle would only hurt Lily, and he truly wanted the best for his daughter. Veronica, feeling the sting of rejection and the tarnish to her professional reputation, distanced herself from Mark and eventually left Harper & Green Investments to start over elsewhere. The last Mark heard, she had moved to New York, chasing another career opportunity, leaving Chicago and her entanglement with Mark behind. As the legalities of divorce progressed, Emma found unexpected support in her mother. Linda visited the lakeside cottage, bonding with Lily and offering Emma a shoulder to cry on. Slowly, Emma felt the suffocating pain, ease replaced by a cautious hope for the future. She began exploring freelance writing opportunities online, using her background in communications to earn an income. Mark, too, had to rebuild. He resigned from Harper & Green Investments after the scandal and took a lower-profile position at a smaller firm in the same industry. He attended therapy, trying to unravel the emotional blind spots that had led him astray. Though heartbreak lingered, he found solace in knowing he could still be part of Lily's life, visiting her on weekends and holidays according to the arrangement with Emma. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. The day Emma received the final decree, she stood by the lake once more, the wind ruffling her hair. A sense of bittersweet closure settled over her. She had loved Mark deeply, and part of her always would, but she understood now that love alone could not fix everything. Lily toddled up to her, holding a shiny pebble in her small hand. "For you, Mummy," she said, her eyes bright. Emma knelt down, taking the pebble and pulling Lily into a gentle hug. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's beautiful." In the distance, Aunt Eleanor watched with a soft smile. She remembered the frightened woman who had appeared on her doorstep all those months ago, searching for refuge. Now Emma stood taller, more assured, despite the heartbreak she had endured. That evening, Emma sat down at her laptop, beginning the process of searching for a place of her own, not too far from Aunt Eleanor's property. She wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by the serenity of nature, but she also needed to carve out an independent life. The phone rang a call from Mark. He was scheduled to see Lily that weekend. Emma's hand hovered over the phone for a moment before she answered. Their conversation was polite, cordial even. In that measured exchange, Emma recognized that while their romantic relationship might be irreparably broken, they could still strive for an amicable partnership as parents. And so life began anew for Emma Davenport, no longer a suburban wife living under the illusion of marital bliss, but a single mother forging her own path, confident in her ability to protect the tiny life in her care, and determined to heal her own wounded heart. This was the story of a shocking betrayal, a bold escape, and one mother's steadfast resolve to protect her child at all costs. Emma's world turned upside down the moment she discovered her husband in that hotel lobby. Yet she found the strength to leave and start over, even when her heart still ached with love and loss. Through family solitude and a fierce commitment to her daughter, she carved a new path for them both. A penthouse overlooking Central Park, a walk-in closet overflowing with Hermes, and a baby on the way. Anya had it all. Or so she thought. In the blink of an eye, her billionaire husband, a man who once promised her the world, stood before her, his words colder than the winter wind whipping across their panoramic window. "I want a divorce." But before the ink could dry on the papers, a knock on the door changed everything. His mistress wasn't there to gloat. She was there to expose a secret so dark it would make his demand for a divorce the least of Anya's worries. The scent of blooming peonies and old money filled the air of the penthouse apartment on the 82nd floor of 432 Park Avenue. It was a sterile, curated scent, one that Anya had come to associate with her life, beautiful, expensive, and utterly devoid of the earthy reality she secretly craved. From this height, New York City was a glittering, silent diorama. The yellow cabs were ants, the sprawling green of Central Park, a manicured carpet, and the people, the millions of bustling, striving souls, were entirely insignificant. Just like her. Anya traced the rim of her porcelain teacup, the delicate floral pattern a stark contrast to the stark minimalist decor Julian insisted upon. Everything was shades of grey chrome and glass. It was the home of a man who admired his reflections both literal and financial. He called it uncluttered. Anya called it empty. Her hand drifted down to the gentle swell of her stomach, a 6-month bump that was her only true possession in this sky-high palace. This baby, her baby, was the one vibrant, chaotic, and real thing in her life. It was a secret garden she nurtured within herself, a world away from Julian's meticulous control. Julian Tolsel-Croft. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a visionary in the volatile world of tech mergers and acquisitions. His face, all sharp angles and disarming smiles, graced the covers of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He had a Midas touch, turning fledgling startups into billion-dollar unicorns with a flick of his pen. He had swept Anya off her feet 5 years ago. She was a junior art curator, then full of opinions and passion, and he had seemed utterly captivated by her spirit. He'd courted her with the kind of grand cinematic gestures that leave a woman breathless, a private viewing at the Met, a weekend trip to Paris, on a whim a rare first-edition book of poetry she'd once mentioned in passing. He had built a gilded cage for her, and she, dazzled by the shine, had walked right in. She'd given up her small gallery job, her cramped but cozy apartment in the village, and her circle of wonderfully messy artistic friends. Julian had said he wanted to give her the world. She hadn't realized he meant he wanted to become her entire world. The sound of the private elevator chiming its arrival pulled her from her reverie. Julian was home. Early. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, a feeling that had become increasingly familiar over the past few months. He strode into the living area, looking every inch the master of the universe. His bespoke Tom Ford suit clung perfectly to his athletic frame, his dark hair was impeccably styled, and his face held the neutral, unreadable expression he reserved for high-stakes negotiations. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the panoramic view, as if calculating its net worth. Julian Anya began, her voice softer than she intended. "You're home. I was just about to have the chef start on dinner." He turned then, and the coldness in his eyes extinguished the small flicker of hope in her chest. There was no warmth, no flicker of recognition for his pregnant wife. It was the look he gave a line item on a balance sheet that was underperforming. "Don't bother," he said, his voice flat and clipped. He walked over to the marble bar and poured himself a whiskey, the clink of the decanter against the glass, unnaturally loud in the silent room. "We need to talk, Anya." Anya's hand instinctively went back to her belly, a protective gesture. "Is everything all right? Did the deal with the Japanese consortium fall through?" She tried to grasp for a familiar topic, a corner of his life she was still permitted to understand. He took a long swallow of his drink, his throat bobbing. "The deal is fine. Everything in my life is perfectly aligned. Except this." He gestured vaguely between them, an all-encompassing wave that dismissed their 5 years of marriage. Their shared bed, the child growing inside her. This she whispered, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. This marriage, he stated, turning to face her fully. His face was a mask of detached finality. "It's run its course. It no longer serves its purpose. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, sharp and deadly, like shards of glass from the panoramic window he so admired. Anya felt the blood drain from her face. She must have misheard. This was Julian's idea of a joke, a cruel, power-playing jest to see her squirm. "A divorce," she stammered, a hysterical little laugh escaping her lips. "Julian, what are you talking about?" "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." "I'm aware of the child's existence," he said, his voice laced with an icy patience that was more terrifying than any shout. "My lawyers have already been instructed to be generous. A trust will be established for the child. You will be provided with a settlement that will allow you to live very comfortably. A nice apartment, a staff, whatever you need. You will want for nothing materially." Materially. The word was an insult, a deliberate reduction of her life, her love, her very being to a transaction. The man who had once quoted poetry to her was now liquidating her like a bad asset. "I don't want a settlement, Julian. I want my husband. I want the father of my child." Her voice cracked, the carefully constructed composure of the perfect wife, shattering into a million pieces. Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. "What has happened to you? What has happened to us? Nothing has happened," he insisted, his calm unwavering. He was a stone wall, impervious to her pain. "This was always a contract, Anya. An arrangement. You provided beauty, social grace, a certain aesthetic. I provided a lifestyle beyond your wildest dreams. The contract is now being terminated." "A contract?" She stared at him aghast. The last 5 years replayed in her mind, now tainted and twisted by his cruel words. Every shared laugh, every tender touch, every whispered promise now felt like a lie, a performance. She felt a wave of nausea so profound it had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She had been a fool, a beautiful, well-kept, blind fool. There's someone else, isn't there? The question was a classic, a cliché she never thought she'd utter. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. Not guilt, but a flicker of annoyance, as if she were a fly buzzing around his head. "That's irrelevant to the situation." "Irrelevant?" she cried, her voice rising. "You're throwing me out pregnant with your child, and you tell me your mistress is irrelevant. Who is she, Julian?" He walked over to the sleek obsidian desk in the corner and pulled a thick document from a leather briefcase. He tossed it onto the glass coffee table between them. The sound was a final, definitive thud. "These are the divorce papers," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. My lawyers advise you to sign them without contest. A prolonged, messy battle will not be beneficial for you, or for the public's perception of you. I have a reputation to maintain. He was threatening her. He was threatening to paint her as a gold digger, a shrew, to drag her name through the mud, while he stood pristine on his mountain of money. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just ending their marriage. He was trying to erase her, to control the very narrative of her existence, even as he expelled her from his. She looked from the papers to his cold, handsome face. The man she loved, or the man she thought she loved, was gone. In his place stood a monster, a creature of pure, unadulterated avarice and ego. A profound, chilling clarity washed over her. The shock receded, replaced by a nascent, unfamiliar anger. No, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Julian raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. No. I will not sign these. I will not be discarded like one of your failed investments. This child, she said, her hand protectively cradling her belly, deserves a father. And I deserve an explanation. A real one. Julian's jaw tightened. He was not used to being told no. The air crackled with his silent fury. He took a step towards her, his physical presence suddenly feeling overwhelming, threatening. You are making a grave mistake, Anya, he hissed. You have no idea what you're messing with. You have no idea the forces at play here. Sign the papers. Take the money. Disappear quietly. It's the best option for everyone. His words held a hidden weight, a darker undercurrent that went beyond a simple sordid affair. The forces at play here. It wasn't the plea of a man in love with someone else. It was a warning, a threat. Before Anya could respond, before she could decipher the strange, panicked glint in his eyes, the chime of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse once more. Both their heads snapped towards the sound. Julian's face for the first time that evening lost its composure. A flash of pure, unadulterated panic crossed his features so quick that Anya almost missed it. He looked trapped. Who is that? Anya asked, her own confusion mounting. They weren't expecting anyone. Julian guarded their privacy with a zeal that bordered on paranoid. Don't. Julian breathed, his eyes wide, as he stared at the elevator doors. It wasn't a command to Anya, but a desperate plea to the universe. The polished steel doors slid open with a soft, expensive sigh. Standing in the doorway was a woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with raven black hair cut into a sharp, severe bob, and eyes the color of emeralds. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin, a stark, bloody slash of color in the monochrome world of Julian's penthouse. Anya's heart stopped. It had to be her. The mistress. She had come to gloat, to witness the final destruction of the wife to claim her prize. Anya braced herself for the humiliation, the final crushing blow. But the woman's eyes weren't on Anya. They were locked on Julian, and they held no trace of triumph. Her beautiful face was pale. Her hands were trembling, and her emerald eyes were wide with a terror that mirrored the panic on Julian's face. She took a shaky step into the room. Julian, the woman, said, her voice a ragged whisper that cut through the silence. It's over. They know. They know everything. Julian stared at her, his mask of control utterly shattered. He looked like a man staring at his own ghost. Anya looked back and forth between her husband and this beautiful, terrified stranger. A cold dread far deeper and more terrifying than the pain of betrayal began to creep up her spine. This wasn't about a simple affair. Julian's strange warning, his panic, this woman's fear, it was all connected to something far bigger. The divorce papers lay on the table, forgotten. The gilded cage had just burst open, but Anya had a sickening feeling that she hadn't been set free. She had just been tossed into the fire. The woman in the crimson dress took another hesitant step into the cavernous living room. Her designer heels, which should have clicked with authority on the polished marble floor, were instead unnervingly silent, as if she were trying to retract her own presence. Anya's mind, still reeling from the whiplash of the divorce demand, struggled to process this new bizarre tableau. The mistress, for who else could she be, wasn't acting like a victor. She was acting like a fugitive. Isabel. What the hell are you doing here? Julian finally managed to say, his voice a strangled rasp. He shot a venomous glare at her, a look that was less about a spurned lover and more about a co-conspirator who had broken rank. He moved almost unconsciously to position himself between Isabel and Anya, a futile attempt to control the flow of information. "I tried to call you Isabel," said her voice, trembling. She ignored Anya completely, her gaze fixed on Julian's increasingly frantic expression. "Your phone was off. I left a dozen messages with your secretary. I had to come. We don't have any time." "Time for what?" Anya interjected, her voice finding a new steely edge. The initial shock was beginning to curdle into suspicion. "Time to coordinate your stories before you throw me out." Isabel's head snapped towards Anya, and for the first time she seemed to truly see her. There was no malice in her emerald eyes, no smug superiority. Instead, Anya saw a flicker of something that looked unnervingly like pity. It was an expression that infuriated Anya more than any taunt could have. "This has nothing to do with your marriage," Isabel said, with a dismissive wave of her hand that was so absolute it was chilling. "That's just collateral damage. A loose end he was trying to tie up." "A loose end." Anya repeated the words, tasting like ash. She looked at Julian, whose face was now a ghastly shade of pale. "Is that what I am to you, Julian? A loose end?" "Shut up!" Isabel Julian roared, finally losing the last vestige of his icy control. He lunged towards her, grabbing her arm. "You shouldn't be here. We had a plan. The plan is shot to hell." "Julian." Isabel wrenched her arm free, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a surge of anger. The plan went up in smoke the moment my brother's name appeared on the SEC's inquiry list this morning. The acronym hung in the air, SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The federal agency that policed Wall Street, the boogeyman of every high-flying financier. It was a name Anya knew from the headlines from the periphery of Julian's world, but it had never felt real, never had any bearing on her curated life. Until now. What SEC inquiry Anya demanded, stepping forward. She was no longer just a passive victim in a domestic drama. She was an unwilling participant in something far more sinister. "Julian, what is she talking about?" "She's talking nonsense." Julian spat, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist 82 floors in the sky. "She's hysterical. Her brother made some bad investments, and now she's panicking and trying to drag me into it. He was trying to rebuild his wall of composure, but the cracks were showing. His hands were trembling, and a thin sheen of sweat had broken out on his forehead. Bad investments. Isabel let out a sharp, bitter laugh that held no humor. Is that what you call it? You used him. Julian. You used my family's brokerage firm as a shield. You ran the entire scheme through their accounts. Made them look like the masterminds while you stayed clean. Scheme. The word was a poison dart. Anya's gaze swung back to Julian. His entire empire, his Midas touch, was it all just a trick? A lie, just like their marriage. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice low and threatening as he took a step towards Isabel. And I suggest you leave now before you say something you'll regret. No. Isabel stood her ground, her chin held high. The fear was still there, but it was now bolstered by a desperate, cornered resolve. I'm not taking the fall for you. My brother is not going to prison for you. I loved you, Julian, or I thought I did, but I see what you are now. You don't love anyone. You consume them. You use them up, and then you discard the husk. Her eyes flickered to Anya. She knows. Don't you? Anya thought back. The last 6 months, Julian's increasing secrecy, his late nights at the office, which she had assumed were due to his affair, the strange hushed phone calls he would take in his study, ending them abruptly if she walked in, the way he had systematically isolated her, severing her ties to her old friends, even discouraging visits from her own family, claiming he wanted to protect her peace and privacy during her pregnancy. It hadn't been about protecting her. It had been about isolating a witness. What scheme, Julian Anya's voice was dangerously quiet. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, terrifying calm. What did you do? Anya, listen to me, Julian said, turning to her, his voice attempting a gentleness that now sounded grotesque and manipulative. She's a scorned woman. She's trying to ruin me because I ended our affair. It's the oldest story in the book. You're my wife. You're the mother of my child. It's you I'm trying to protect. He was trying to play her to use their shared history and their unborn child as a shield. But the spell was broken. She could see the puppeteer's strings. Protect. She repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. By demanding a divorce an hour ago, by calling me a loose end, you needed to tie up. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to cut me loose before the ship sank, weren't you? You wanted to make sure I couldn't claim a single cent of your precious, dirty money when it all came crashing down. The truth of it hit her with the force of a physical blow. The divorce wasn't about his love for Isabel. It was a calculated financial maneuver. A preemptive strike in a war he knew was coming. He was willing to make his own pregnant wife a refugee from his life to save himself. It's called a SPAC, Isabel said, suddenly, her voice sharp and clear. She was no longer speaking just to Julian, but to Anya, to the room, to the universe. She was confessing. A special purpose acquisition company. It's the cleanest grift on Wall Street right now. Anya had heard Julian talk about SPACs. He'd called them blank check companies, a faster, more efficient way to take a private company, public bypassing the rigorous scrutiny of a traditional IPO. He had launched 3 of them in the last 2 years, raising billions from investors eager to get in on the ground floor of his next big thing. The media had lauded him as an innovator. Your husband, Isabel, continued, her voice gaining a morbid momentum, is a master at selling dreams. He would launch a SPAC, promising to merge it with a revolutionary tech company. The hype alone would send the stock soaring. Investors from massive hedge funds to ordinary people would pour their life savings into it all, based on his reputation. She paused, taking a shaky breath. But there was no company, Anya. There was never any revolutionary tech. It was all smoke and mirrors. A shell game. Julian lunged for her again. "You're lying, am I?" Isabel sidestepped him, her eyes burning with a righteous fury. "Tell her about Project Chimera, Julian. Tell her about the next-gen AI integration platform that was going to change the world. Show her the fancy prospectus, the one with the fabricated data and the photoshopped pictures of a non-existent office in Silicon Valley." She turned back to Anya, her voice dropping. "The money from the investors. It wasn't used for acquisitions. It was funneled, laundered through a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations, one of which was my brother's unwitting firm. Julian would skim off hundreds of millions, paying off early investors with money from new ones to keep the illusion going. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, Anya just dressed up in a fancy Wall Street suit. And the whole thing is about to collapse." Anya stared at Julian, waiting for him to deny it, to rage, to offer some plausible explanation. But he said nothing. He simply stood there, breathing heavily, the cornered animal, the master of the universe, brought low by a single, unraveling thread. The entire foundation of her life, the penthouse, the clothes, the art, the security was not just built on lies, but on theft, on the stolen dreams and life savings of countless unknown people. She felt a dizzying vertigo, the floor seeming to drop away beneath her. Her hand flew to her stomach, to the one pure thing in this world of deceit. This child, her son or daughter, was heir to a fortune that didn't exist, a legacy of shame. So the divorce. Anya trailed off, the full, monstrous picture becoming clear. The settlement you offered me, that generous trust for our little child. Where was that money coming from, Julian? He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the dark, terrifying truth. "It's the last of the clean money, isn't it?" she whispered in horror. "The money you had before all this started. You were trying to firewall it, to put it in my name and the baby's name so the SEC couldn't touch it when they came for the rest. You weren't giving me a gift. You were using your pregnant wife and your unborn child as a money mule." The silence that followed was a confession. It was the most damning sound Anya had ever heard. The man she had married was not just a cheat or a liar. He was a predator of the highest order, and he had just tried to make her his final accomplice. The doorbell chimed, not the private elevator this time, but the main service door to the apartment. A loud, insistent official buzzing. It was a sound none of them could ignore. Julian, Isabel, and Anya all froze, their three-person drama instantly rendered insignificant. This was no longer a private implosion. The outside world was knocking. Julian's eyes, wide with terror, met Anya's. The last shred of his bravado was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a man whose time had run out. The buzzing came again, longer this time, more demanding. "Don't answer it," Julian whispered, a desperate, futile command. But Anya was already walking towards the door. The fog of her shock and betrayal was beginning to clear, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had been a pawn in his game for far too long. The game was over. Her hand closed around the cold steel handle of the door. Whatever was on the other side, it was the beginning of her new reality. She had to face it, for herself and for the child she carried. She pulled the door open. Standing in the hallway were two men in dark, conservative suits. They were nondescript, their faces impassive, but they carried an aura of unshakable authority that made the air in the multi-million-dollar penthouse feel cheap and thin. One of them held up a badge and an official-looking document. Julian Croft, the lead agent, asked, his voice calm and professional, but with an underlying steel that tolerated no argument. His eyes flicked past Anya to where Julian stood frozen in the middle of the living room. "I'm Agent Miller with the FBI. We have a warrant to search these premises." The FBI. The letters seemed to suck all the remaining oxygen out of the room. It was one thing to hear the acronym SEC from a panicked mistress. It was another to see the flesh and blood embodiment of a federal investigation standing on your doorstep. Julian looked as if he had been turned to stone. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy grey pallor. He stared at the agents, his mouth slightly agape. The master manipulator suddenly a speechless puppet. Isabel let out a small, choked sob and sank onto one of the ridiculously expensive minimalist sofas, her crimson dress pooling around her like a stain. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by the grim resignation of someone who had pulled the pin on a grenade and was now simply waiting for the blast. Agent Miller and his partner stepped into the apartment, their sensible shoes making solid, real-world sounds on the marble floor. Anya stepped back, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. She was watching a movie of her own life imploding. The agent's eyes swept the room, cataloguing the art, the furniture, the view, not with admiration, but with the cold appraisal of an asset seizure. "We also have a warrant for your arrest." "Mr. Croft." Agent Miller continued in the same dispassionate tone, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "For conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering." The words were a death sentence, a formal indictment of everything Isabel had just revealed. The Ponzi scheme project, Chimera. The stolen money, it was all real. And now the consequences were real too. "This is a mistake," Julian finally stammered, his voice weak and unconvincing. "My lawyers." "Your lawyers have been notified," Agent Miller cut him off smoothly. "They can meet you downtown. Please place your hands behind your back." The sight of Julian Croft, the titan of Wall Street, the man whose confident smirk had sold billions in fraudulent dreams, being handcuffed in his own living room, was surreal. The metallic click of the cuffs locking into place was the final definitive sound of his world ending. He didn't resist. The fight was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed shock. As the second agent began to lead Julian towards the door, Isabel suddenly stood up, her face streaked with tears, but her voice filled with a new urgent terror. "Wait!" she cried out, her voice sharp. "That's not all. That's not the real reason." Agent Miller paused, turning to her with a look of mild professional interest. "The real reason for what, ma'am?" "For the divorce," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Julian. "For why he had to get her out. It's not just about the money. There's something else. Something worse." Anya, who had been standing silently by the wall, felt a new wave of ice-cold dread. Worse. What could possibly be worse than a billion-dollar fraud that had ruined countless lives? What was the dark secret that even a massive financial crime was meant to cover up? Julian's head snapped up. He shot a look at Isabel, a look of pure murderous rage mixed with desperate pleading. "Isabel, no. Don't. I have to," she sobbed. "They need to know everything. They need to know why you were so desperate." She turned to the agents, her words tumbling out in a frantic, disjointed rush. "The SPACs. The fraud. That was the end game. But it started somewhere else. It started with his first company, Gen Tech Solutions. Anya vaguely remembered the name. It was the company Julian had founded before they met the one that had given him his initial millions and launched his reputation as a tech prodigy. He had sold it for a massive profit years ago. "What about it?" Agent Miller asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Gentech's flagship product was a proprietary data encryption software. Isabel explained, her voice gaining clarity as she forced the story out. It was sold to dozens of high-level corporate clients, banks, law firms, private equity funds. They promised impenetrable security. She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Anya's. The pity was back in her gaze, but now it was deeper, darker, filled with a horror that Anya couldn't yet comprehend. But it wasn't an encryption software, Anya. It was a key. Julian built a back door into the system, a master key that gave him access to everything. For years, he had a live feed into the most sensitive corporate data in the country. Mergers and acquisitions plans, confidential legal strategies, insider trading information. The scale of it was dizzying. Julian hadn't just been a con artist. He had been a digital phantom, a ghost in the machine, systematically stealing the lifeblood of the corporate world. That's how he made his first fortune. Isabel continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It wasn't genius. It was theft on an industrial scale. He knew which companies were going to be acquired before they did. He knew which stocks would soar and which would plummet. He wasn't predicting the market. He was reading the script. The agents exchanged a look. This was new information. This went beyond the SPACs. This was the origin story of his entire criminal enterprise. But that's still not the secret. Isabel choked out, tears streaming down her face again. That's just more fraud. Then what is it? Anya finally spoke, her voice a hollow echo in the room. She had to know. She had to know the final, terrible truth that was poisoning the very air she breathed. Isabel's gaze was fixed on Anya's pregnant belly. 2 years ago, one of the companies he was spying on, a pharmaceutical firm called Biovance. They were on the verge of a major breakthrough, a revolutionary new gene therapy treatment. But they had a problem. Their final human trials were showing some irregularities, dangerous side effects that they were trying to solve before announcing the drug. Julian was now shaking his head violently, his muffled pleas ignored by the agent holding him. Don't say it, Isabel. Please. Julian knew the drug was flawed. Isabel forged on her voice, cracking with the weight of her confession. He had access to the raw, hidden data. He knew it was dangerous. But he also knew that if another company acquired Biovance, before the flaws were public, the stock would triple overnight. So he used his insider information. He leaked the news of the potential breakthrough without mentioning the dangerous side effects to a rival corporation. They initiated a hostile takeover, and Julian, having bought millions in Biovance stock beforehand, made a fortune. Over $200 million in a single week. That's insider trading. A huge case, but Agent Miller prompted. But it wasn't just insider trading. Isabel screamed, the sound raw and agonizing. The new company, eager to recoup their investment, rushed the drug to market. They buried the flawed data. They pushed it through a compromised approval process. The drug was called Veridia. Anya's blood ran cold. Veridia. The name was a lightning bolt, a searing brand on her memory. It was prescribed as an advanced fertility treatment. Isabel whispered, her eyes locked on Anya's. For couples who had tried everything else, it was hailed as a miracle drug. Anya's hand, the one not pressed against her stomach, flew to her mouth. No, it couldn't be. The room began to spin. The minimalist grey walls seemed to close in on her. She and Julian had struggled to conceive. For 2 years they had been through a heart-breaking cycle of hope and disappointment. Doctors had found no specific issue, just unexplained infertility. Then a year ago, a new specialist, a top doctor recommended by Julian himself, had suggested a new cutting-edge treatment. A miracle drug from Europe, he had called it. Its name was Viridia. Anya stared at Julian, at the man she had married, the man whose child she was carrying. The man who had looked on with what she thought was shared joy when the pregnancy test finally came back positive. But it hadn't been joy. It had been the culmination of a monstrous plan. The side effects, Anya could barely form the words. Her throat was tight with terror. What were the side effects Julian finally broke? A guttural, animalistic sob tore from his chest. Anya, I'm sorry. I can fix it. We have money. The best doctors. Isabel gave the final brutal answer, her voice devoid of all emotion, a flat line of horror. It worked. The drug allowed women to conceive. That part was true. But the hidden data from the original trials showed that in nearly 80% of cases, the fetus would develop a rare and fatal neurological disorder. Most didn't survive the 3rd trimester. Those who were born didn't live past their 1st year. The world went silent. The agents, the handcuffs, the penthouse, it all dissolved into an indistinct blur. The only thing that was real was the life kicking inside her. A life she had craved, a life she had celebrated, a life that had been conceived through a monstrous lie, a poison given to her by the man she loved. This was the dark secret. The divorce wasn't about protecting his money. It was about severing all ties before his child was born with the fatal condition he himself had knowingly unleashed upon the world. He wasn't trying to disown a wife. He was trying to outrun a death sentence. He was trying to erase the ultimate evidence of his crime, his own dying child. Anya looked at her husband, the father of her child, the architect of her destruction. He was no longer a man. He was a void. A black hole of greed and ambition that had consumed everything, including the life of his own unborn baby. The strength drained from her legs. The room tilted violently, the glittering view of Central Park spinning into a nauseating vortex. As her knees buckled and the world faded to black, the last thing she heard was the distant hollow sound of her own scream. Anya awoke to a world bleached of all color. The first sensation was not sight, but smell. A sharp, aggressive scent of antiseptic that scoured her nostrils and bore no resemblance to the curated peony and old money fragrance of her former life. The second was sound, the soft, insistent, and terrifyingly rhythmic beep of a machine somewhere to her left. For a fleeting, merciful moment, she was adrift in a sea of disorientation, the horrors of the previous evening feeling like the suffocating remnants of a fever dream. Had it been real? The cold words, the crimson dress, the click of handcuffs. Then with the force of a physical impact, the memories crashed back in. Viridia. The name detonated in her mind a single word that contained a universe of betrayal. It was the name of the drug. The poison, the monstrous lie she had welcomed into her body. A raw, guttural sob tore itself from her throat, and her hand, trembling uncontrollably, flew to her stomach. The gentle, reassuring swell was still there, a fragile vessel in a venomous sea. Was her baby the one pure thing she had left already a ghost? Easy now, Mrs. Croft. Take a deep breath. A calm, steady voice pierced through the fog of her panic. A woman in navy blue scrubs her face, a welcome portrait of professional kindness, was adjusting the IV drip in Anya's arm. You fainted. We brought you straight to Lenox Hill Hospital. We've been monitoring you and the baby. The baby, Anya's voice was a ragged whisper, a thread of sound in the cavernous silence of her fear. She couldn't bring herself to ask the real question, the one that clawed at the inside of her skull. Is it dying? The nurse's eyes softened with understanding. The baby is fine, she said, her words deliberate and clear. A little stressed when you were brought in, but the heartbeat is strong and steady now. Your own heart rate is elevated, which is understandable. You've had a severe shock. The baby is strong. 4 simple words. They were not a cure, not a promise, but they were a lifeline. In the raging flood of her shattered reality, Anya clung to them as if they were the last solid ground on earth. Her baby was a fighter. It was already more than its father had ever been. I need to see a doctor, Anya managed, pushing herself up slightly. The effort made the room spin. A specialist, not just an OB, a geneticist, someone who understands. I need to know everything. Her voice broke on the last word. She needed to know the shape of the monster she was facing. We've already paged the head of our maternal fetal medicine department, Dr. Eleanor Ramirez. The nurse reassured her, fluffing a thin pillow behind her head. She's the best. She'll be here to speak with you shortly. For now, just try to breathe. Rest was an impossible luxury. Her mind was a torture chamber, replaying Julian's face, twisting in panic, the cold finality of the FBI agent's voice, and Isabel's horrified confession over and over. The entire architecture of her life, a magnificent structure she had once admired, had been revealed as a criminal enterprise, a house of cards built on stolen dreams. And the final, most intimate, most unspeakable betrayal was swimming in her very womb, conceived from a miracle that was in truth a time bomb. As the nurse left to give her a moment, another figure appeared hesitantly in the doorway. It was Isabel. She had shed the blood-red dress, the armor of Julian's mistress, and now wore a simple, anonymous pair of jeans and a grey sweater. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the faint purple smudges of exhaustion beneath her eyes. The emerald fire in her irises had been banked, leaving a weary, sorrowful glow. Anya's body tensed. A primal part of her wanted to scream at this woman, the beautiful harbinger of her apocalypse. But the anger felt distant, a secondary emotion, muted by the all-consuming terror of Julian's ultimate sin. Isabel wasn't the enemy. She was just another piece of scorched debris in the blast radius of Julian Croft. "What do you want?" Anya asked, her voice raspy, devoid of accusation, but heavy with exhaustion. I came to see if you were all right," Isabel said, her voice barely a whisper. She hovered by the door, a respectful distance away, as if acknowledging she was trespassing on sacred ground of grief. "And to tell you, I told them everything." Anya remained silent, watching her. "The agents at the penthouse," Isabel clarified, twisting a loose thread on her sweater. After they took you, I stayed for hours. I told them about Viridia, about the Bio-Vance data, about Julian's back door into Gentech. I gave them the offshore account numbers he'd bragged about, the server locations he thought were hidden. Everything I knew. My brother is working with them too. He's turning over every record from his firm. He's terrified, but he wants to make it right. Why Anya's question was genuine, a flicker of curiosity in the darkness. Why not just disappear? He would have given you money to run. Isabel finally met her gaze, and Anya saw the profound depth of her self-loathing. Because he was going to let my brother, my family, take the fall for a crime he masterminded. That was the first crack in the fantasy. But the moment I found out about Viridia, the real truth of it, I looked at him, Julian, the man I thought I loved, and I saw a void. It wasn't just greed, Anya. What kind of person knowingly condemns unborn children for profit? It was a level of evil I couldn't comprehend. Her eyes flickered to Anya's stomach. When he told me he was divorcing you, I knew why. He was running from the evidence, from his own child. And I knew you were pregnant, but I didn't know about the drug. Not until my brother's lawyer uncovered the connection. The thought of you, going through the rest of your pregnancy celebrating only to face that. She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't let you be the last one to know the truth. It was the only thing I could do to claw back a single shred of my own soul. In that moment, Anya saw past the affair, past the label of mistress. She saw another woman who had been utterly conned, another life consumed by Julian's insatiable ego. They were bound by a strange, twisted sisterhood forged in the fires of his spectacular destruction. They've frozen everything. Isabel added her voice, flat and emotionless. Every asset. The penthouse is a federal crime scene. The accounts are locked. The cars, the art, the watches, it's all gone. Evidence in the largest fraud case in a decade. His lawyers are saying the evidence is insurmountable. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell again. Good, a cold, hard part of Anya thought. Let him rot. But the satisfaction was hollow, a fleeting warmth in an Arctic landscape of pain. Julian's imprisonment couldn't reverse time, couldn't purify the poison. The door opened again, and a woman with intelligent, compassionate eyes and an air of calm authority entered the room. Mrs. Croft. I'm Dr. Ramirez. With a final lingering look of profound regret, Isabel quietly slipped out of the room, leaving Anya to face her new reality. The next hour was a clinical, terrifying blur of medical terminology, consent forms, and agonizing questions. Dr. Ramirez was a miracle of empathy and professionalism. She explained the process for an advanced diagnostic amniocentesis, carefully and patiently outlining the procedure, the risks, and the stark reality of the potential results. She didn't offer false hope, only facts. And for that, Anya was grateful. I have to know, Dr. Anya pleaded, her composure finally crumbling under the clinical weight of it all. Whatever it is, I have to know what I'm facing. We will get you answers, Doctor. Ramirez promised, her hand briefly resting on Anya's arm. The simple human touch was grounding. As quickly and as safely as we possibly can. The days that followed were a unique form of purgatory. Anya remained in the hospital, a voluntary prisoner in a sterile white room, while the world outside feasted on the carcass of her old life. The news of Julian's arrest had gone supernova. "Wall Street Wunderkind or Ponzi King," screamed the cable news chyrons. His smug, handsome face was plastered everywhere the poster boy for catastrophic hubris. The stories detailed the SPAC's fraud in lurid detail, but the darkest secret, the corporate evil of Viridia, remained a tightly sealed component of the federal case, a horror not yet fit for public consumption. Anya refused all visitors, save for her parents, who flew in immediately, their faces etched with a pain that mirrored her own. She hired a team of lawyers, not to fight for a share of Julian's blood money, but to meticulously expunge him from her life. To dissolve the marriage, to legally and financially firewall her child from the toxic Croft name and its indelible legacy of shame. She existed in a state of suspended animation, the week-long wait for the test results stretching into an eternity. She didn't sleep, she merely drifted in and out of consciousness. In her waking hours, she would stare out the window at the city, a city that now seemed alien to her. Every pregnant woman she saw, every baby in a stroller was a stab to the heart. She was suspended between a life that was over and a future that was too terrifying to contemplate. Finally, the day came. Dr. Ramirez entered her room alone, closing the door softly behind her. She held a file, and her expression was calm, professional, and utterly unreadable. Anya's heart began to pound, a frantic, desperate rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the precipice. She gripped her own hands over her belly, a protective gesture that felt painfully inadequate. Dr. Ramirez sat in the chair beside the bed, opened the file but didn't look at it. She looked directly at Anya. "We have the results from the full genomic sequencing panel," she said, her voice even. Anya held her breath, bracing for the impact, for the words that would shatter the final fragments of her world. Dr. Ramirez took a slow, deliberate breath. "Anya, your baby is perfectly healthy." The words didn't register. They were a language she had forgotten how to speak. Anya just stared at her, her mind a blank slate of incomprehension. "What, no? That's not possible. Viridia, the neurological degradation." "I know," the doctor said gently, her professional calm finally breaking into a warm, reassuring smile. "We read the federal case files your lawyers managed to get unsealed for us. We knew the exact rare genetic markers we were looking for, and they are not there. We ran the test twice to be certain. He is completely, unequivocally unaffected. He." Her mind snagged on the word. "He. You're having a son." Anya Dr. Ramirez confirmed, her eyes shining. "A healthy baby boy." The dam broke. A sound, a wail that was equal parts grief and joy, tore from deep inside her. It was the sound of a week of terror, of months of unknowing, of a lifetime of betrayal, being washed away by a single miraculous wave of relief. The tears came, then hot and cleansing, pouring down her face as she finally truly let go. But how she sobbed, her body shaking. Isabel said, 80%. 80% is not 100%, the doctor said, softly, her voice thick with emotion. It means 20%, 1 in 5 were spared. It's a game of Russian roulette, played with the most precious stakes imaginable. It's a monstrous, unforgivable gamble. But Anya, you and your son, you won. She won. It wasn't a victory over Julian. It was a victory over fate, over poison, over the darkness that had tried to claim her future. Anya checked out of the hospital the next morning. The world looked different, the colors more vibrant. the air cleaner. The Julian Croft penthouse on Park Avenue was sealed a monument to a dead life. She walked away from it without a backward glance. With a small, life-saving loan from her parents, she found a modest two-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn's Park Slope. It was a world away from the silent, sterile grandeur she had known. From her window, she saw not a curated park, but a living one. She could hear the joyful shrieks of children playing the friendly bark of dogs, the distant, reassuring rumble of the F train. It was the chaotic, beautiful symphony of real life. She spent the final peaceful months of her pregnancy rebuilding. She bought a second-hand crib and painted the nursery a cheerful, sunny yellow. She reconnected with her old circle of wonderfully messy, artistic friends who enveloped her in a cocoon of unconditional love and support, never once mentioning her notorious past. They brought her soup, helped her assemble furniture, and made her laugh, truly laugh for the first time in years. 3 months later, Leo Alexander was born, weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces. He was loud, demanding, and utterly perfect. He had her eyes and a stubborn tuft of dark hair. Holding him for the first time, skin to skin, feeling his tiny, fragile fingers instinctively curl around hers, Anya felt a love so vast and powerful it rearranged her entire universe. This was real wealth. This was a legacy. One rainy afternoon as a 2-week-old, Leo slept soundly on her chest. A news alert popped up on her phone. Julian Croft sentenced. She read that faced with an avalanche of evidence and Isabel's unshakable testimony, he had accepted a plea bargain to avoid having the full horrific details of the Viridia scandal made public in a trial. He was sentenced to 150 years in a federal supermax facility with no possibility of parole. Anya looked down at her sleeping son, his chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. She felt no hatred for Julian, no desire for revenge. She felt nothing at all. He was a ghost, the antagonist of a story that was already over. Her story and Leo's was just beginning. Her life was no longer defined by the man she had lost, but by the son she had almost lost and had miraculously gained. She was not the millionaire's disgraced wife. She was Leo's mother, and in the quiet, sun-drenched world of her small Brooklyn apartment, she was the richest woman in the world. Anya's story is a harrowing journey from a gilded cage to true freedom. It's a reminder that wealth can be a mask for unimaginable darkness, and that true strength isn't found in penthouses or designer clothes, but in the fierce, unyielding power of a mother's love. She lost a life of luxury, but gained a life of purpose, proving that even after the most devastating betrayals, we have the power to rise from the ashes and build a new world for ourselves and for our children. Her story isn't just about the downfall of a wicked man, but the rise of an unbreakable woman.